On this week's very special episode of Ride the Lightning, the Tesla unofficial podcast, Tesla chief designer Franz von Holzhausen joins me for his second interview on this show. Our almost hour-long discussion covers the Cybertruck, next-gen Roadster, the new Model S, and much more. Plus, after the interview, I'll talk about Tesla's huge across-the-board price cuts that happened this week as well. Stay tuned. What's happening, friends? I'm Ryan McCaffrey here with you for episode 389 of Ride the Lightning, the weekly Tesla unofficial podcast for January 15th, 2023. And as you've already figured out by now, this really is an extra special episode of this podcast because opportunities like this do not come around very often. Franz von Holzhausen, the chief designer at Tesla, will be coming up here in just a moment. We have a 54-minute interview that we conducted this past Wednesday, January 11th, at the Tesla Design Studio in Hawthorne, California. I was delighted to take the quick trip down from my home base here in the San Francisco Bay Area down to see Franz. Had a wonderful time chatting with him. I want to thank Franz and thank his team for making it happen, for being super accommodating. They let me come into the conference room and set up 30 minutes ahead of time because I had all kinds of stuff. I had my laptop, my mics, all that stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this interview. A lot of ground is covered. The Cybertruck, a little bit on the next-gen Roadster, some talk about the new Model S and the redesign there, and a whole lot more. There are time codes in the episode description if you'd like to just jump to anything, any specific topic that Franz talks about. And if you're new to Ride the Lightning, number one, welcome. Number two, I have a couple of other special episodes that I'd like to point you towards if you enjoy this one. First, I'll just mention episode 220, because that was Franz von Holzhausen's first appearance on this podcast, the first time I got to interview him. That was in November of 2019, a mere couple of weeks before the Cybertruck unveiling. And then by happy coincidence, the big milestone episode 200 was when I had Elon Musk on this podcast for a 1-hour interview. So feel free to check those out if you're interested. But in the meantime, let's do this new interview with Franz. Check it out. Enjoy. I am back at the Tesla Design Center here in Hawthorne, California, with the chief designer himself, Franz von Holzhausen. Franz, thanks for having me back.
Great to see you.
You are the first, I think, repeat guest on this podcast. It's also my first time back here since the Cybertruck event, the Cybertruck unveiling, which took place feet from us.
Yeah, just around the corner.
Just over here. And, I want to start there because we're in 2023. It's the year of the Cybertruck. And I want to start by nerding out with you on this a little bit, because I know there are some things you might not be ready to answer, but I'm hoping there are some things that you are. So I went to the Petersen Auto Museum, saw the Tesla exhibit. It's awesome. I've recommended all my listeners go at some point between now and October, because I don't think we're ever going to see all of that stuff in one place like that ever again.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, arguably, it's a great recap of the seemingly short history of Tesla. And when you're in the thick of it, and like we are, and you're racing through, and we're continually developing and expanding and creating new stuff, sometimes you forget to look back. And even just walking through there and being a part of helping them put the exhibit together and curating a lot of those things, it was just great to take a step back for a second and remind ourselves where we've come from and our journey and how far we've progressed. So
was most of that stuff just under a car cover collecting dust in this building?
We've collected and kept it because we felt we needed to preserve history on some level, not ever really knowing what we were gonna do with it, how we were gonna do it, and then just in conversations with the Petersen, they're amazing. We kind of came up with this idea to do a little showcase of the Tesla history, and luckily we had most of the stuff intact. So yeah, I think just it's always good to hang on to a little bit of history, and you never know where it's going to go. And I think that it's been great to put it all together in one space. And like you said, it's a really concise way of walking through the history. And it's now that we've expanded globally, it's hard to imagine like all that stuff coming together again.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do our own.
I've advocated for that very thing. I really think for the history of the electric vehicle, all of that stuff should be on a permanent display somewhere. The original,
and what's nice about the
VIN-1 Roadster and the original silver Model 3 prototype.
What's nice about what they did at the Petersen is it really does talk about the evolution of the EV from early 1900s all the way up through what we've been able to do. So it's not just Tesla.
So I'm sure by design, the finale of the exhibit is the Cybertruck Alpha prototype that sits there on display while work goes on at Giga Texas to get ready for the production version. And there is, you and I have talked before, of course, I'm a former DeLorean owner. That car is near and dear to my heart. You've talked about how you love wedge-shaped cars. There is an original design sketch of yours that is blown up, hanging above the Cybertruck prototype at the museum that, to me, as somebody that looked at a DeLorean in his garage for 12 years, it looks awfully DeLorean-like, Franz. It's got, of course, the stainless steel in the sketch, but then the black trim running along the belt line, the way the way you drew the vault cover kind of looking like the rear louver sunshade on a DeLorean. So as someone that loves that car, and that car means a lot to me, were you directly inspired in some way by the DeLorean for the Cybertruck?
Actually, no. And I think it could be like horoscopes where you read the thing and you're like, oh yeah, that could apply to me.
Yeah.
And maybe you're reading into it because of your love affair with the DeLorean. The DeLorean was, I think, a really interesting vehicle, obviously, and there's a lot of similarities, but it was not a direct inspiration, although probably peripherally it popped up on a screen or it was in a page of a book or something while we were in the process.
I mean, you did have one at the Cybertruck unveiling.
Yeah, because we actually, we worked with the Petersen to bring some of those exhibits over, and we thought it would be fun to have some of the wedgie type cars that they had over, and I think also just, like the Blade Runner cars and getting into the spirit and the mindset.
Well, I remember, but because all that stuff, for people that weren't there, all those pieces that you're talking about were sort of outside before the unveiling.
Yeah, nobody knew what the truck looked like.
Yeah, we didn't know what the Cybertruck looked like.
So we were trying to set a tone and get a mindset going. And I think it worked.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing the DeLorean going, this doesn't fit in with any of this stuff. Why is there an 80s pop culture car? Because it was a Back to the Future kidded version. And then, of course, when the Cybertruck comes out, it all makes sense. And so at the Petersen, I was able to really kind of study the stainless steel of the Cybertruck prototype up close. And this is what I talk about when I warn you that I'm going to get real nerdy. This is it. So the DeLorean has the stainless is grained. It is
like
along the direction. Yeah, it's a brushed stainless steel. So the Cybertruck prototype didn't seem to have as sort of clear and obvious of a pattern. And I'm curious if the prototype is representative of the final truck in that regard. And the reason I ask that is because with a DeLorean, taking a scratch out, you take a heavy-duty Scotch-Brite pad, you just kind of blend it with the grain, and the scratch is gone. But since there's not sort of a direction to go on the Cybertruck prototype, I'm curious if you're really going to be able to blend out any scratches easily. So that's the nerdy stuff I'm talking about.
We spent a lot of time developing a finish that can be, if the stainless is incredibly hard. So if in the event that there is a scratch, we do have a process that you could yourself basically buff it or remove the scratch as well, and return to the basic finish that's on the stainless. So it's a different process. It's not the same as like the brush finish on a refrigerator or a DeLorean or something, but there is an intentional finish that we apply to it.
So that one,
and it is able to be, cured or fixed or whatever.
Excellent.
In the event that, it's going to be something pretty intense that does actually scratch the surface.
I did notice a scratch from an intense event that you can see where your sledgehammer impacted.
If you look really close, you can just see it. But
back in the early 80s, I'm going to stay on the stainless here for a minute because it's so fascinating to me. Again, you're right, I'm applying my personal experience, but the fact is, the first company to do gull-wing-like doors on a mass production vehicle since DeLorean is you guys. The first company to do a stainless steel body on a production car since DeLorean is now also you guys. So there are some, as a DeLorean guy, there are these bizarre little parallels that obviously are relatively coincidental.
Yes,
but
that's interesting.
There is another little thing, a little tiny piece of DeLorean history where before the company went under, in the early 80s, DuPont was tinkering with a tinted clear coat to apply to the stainless that would kind of give it a color besides just the silver of stainless steel, but let the grain of the stainless show through. Has anything like that been sort of considered along the
Well, I think the stainless is already incredibly hard and doesn't need another finish. We've experimented with some finishes,
but purely as a cosmetic thing, I'm talking about.
Yeah, we've experimented with some finishes.
Yeah.
I think there's always the opportunity to wrap. And the thing that we wanted to do is to continue to preserve the hardness. And anytime you put something softer like a clear coat or a painted finish on the material, it just then basically takes away from the idea of putting the hardest thing on the outer surface.
Right.
So,
a lot of DeLorean owners have found out the hard way that if you attempt to paint stainless steel, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're going to be washing the car and you're going to find some paint chips. It just doesn't stay.
Yeah, but I mean, the original mindset behind the stainless was put the hardest thing on the outside and not the most fragile thing. And a painted surface is generally, even though they're pretty tough, it's still the most fragile part of the exterior of the car. So, we wanted to really avoid that. We have played around with some finishes, but right now the stainless is the winner.
And I've told everybody that listens to my podcast, like just leave it, because it is the most unique thing. You've had the privilege of seeing it in the sun and also under nighttime lighting. The way it reflects light so differently than a painted car. It just kind of glows at night.
Yeah, and that's an intentional finish where we took the glossy sheen down a level with the finish that we're applying to it, and which is repeatable, and I think like you mentioned, allows you to get rid of Mars and scratches and things like that in the event that happens.
There's one other little DeLorean thing I want to bring up, and then I'll move on. More? I promise. Yeah, it's
flux capacitor or something.
Not that, but so DeLorean Motor Company offered. Of course, they didn't last, but they offered 25-year body warranties on the stainless steel as sort of a vote of confidence that yes, this is designed to last a long time. You guys are taking that to the next level with the thickness and the hardness of this stainless compared to a DeLorean. It's a very light, thin panel to try and keep the weight down.
Right.
So can we expect a sort of similar crazy long warranty on the body itself for the Cybertruck?
I don't know. I would imagine it's maybe not required, but that's something we can definitely look into for sure.
It makes sense. I'm just sort of curious. All right, let's get into, there's an Easter egg on the Cybertruck prototype that until the Petersen exhibit, I didn't know about it, and I'm not sure anybody knew about it. And
let's see if I know about it.
I should hope so. On the charge port, which I believe has since moved on future prototypes, which I'll ask you about next, but the light up Tesla T logo that's the charge indicator on the Cybertruck original prototype is cyberfied. There are no round edges on it. It's all sharp. It's just this like it's cyberfied Tesla T. Is that cool little Easter egg going to make it to the final production Cybertruck?
I think you'll have to wait and see. I mean, that thing was, we were looking at in those development days when we were designing the truck. It was such like a low resolution, low bit idea. in its kind of simplicity as a form. We thought like this 8-bit concept, and so we did an 8-bit version of the T, and that's I think one of the only logos that's actually on the car. If
it doesn't end up making it on the physical charge port, I hope it's like in the UI somewhere. It's so cool. By the way, can we also get a T-shirt on the Tesla shop of that cyberfied Tesla T?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
It's really cool. For anybody that hasn't seen it, you can just probably find it on Google image search. Did you expect the reaction to the Cybertruck that I think was generally the general reaction was, oh my God, I hate it. And then there was this 24 to 48 hours, sometimes a little shorter for some people, sometimes a little longer, to then coming around to, oh my gosh, I completely love it. For me personally, I will admit to you as we sit here, hopefully it won't get me kicked out, I did not like it at first. When it came out, I thought, oh no. But starting with the stainless steel and sort of the function, it completely won me back over to where I love it and I have a reservation and I'm looking forward to buying
So the function is what won you over, or?
Well, I'll be honest, as a DeLorean guy, it started with the stainless steel.
Okay.
It was like, oh my gosh, they're doing a stainless steel vehicle.
Right.
And then as I thought about it more of, well, my wife and I could buy this and it could last 20, 30 years. Because having owned a DeLorean, the car was, I think, 30 years old when I sold it, and it looked brand new because the finish was perfect.
Yeah.
It doesn't age. It doesn't rust.
The plastic ages, right? That's the hard part.
Yeah, that those things you got to take care of, just like any other rubber pieces and things like that. But the Cybertruck's the same way, where okay, it's going to be resistant to door. Like, I'm really picky about my cars. If my Model 3 were here, you'd probably have a hard time. Well, you probably wouldn't have a hard time. Most people would probably have a hard time realizing it's a 2018 with 50,000 miles on it, because I'm really meticulous about it.
I love that.
and with the Cybertruck, I know from personal experience how easy stainless steel is to care for. Mm-hmm. You just soap and water and you're done.
Yep.
If you could spray the whole thing down with Windex and a paper towel if you want to. So yeah, it started with the stainless for me and sort of the longevity and the ease of the care, and I came around on the look of it too. I love now that it's completely it's a total paradigm shift of a design. And I heard from so many of my podcast listeners that, and they have their own little specific reasons, but a lot of them went through the same thing of, I hate this, to sleep on it for a night or two, to, oh, I can't wait to get one and I have a reservation. So
I also think,
were you expecting that?
I mean, I didn't 100% know what to expect. I knew we had something good, and the more that we lived with it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the more it had the elements that you would look for in something more masculine in a truck.
Yeah.
Even though it was simple, it still had this kind of brute stance to it. It had a character that had a toughness feeling. Obviously, the material makes it tough, but there was, in the stance, there was also a toughness. So I think, and also just as we worked on it and we saw more people getting comfortable with it, it felt like it just is so different. It needs a moment to grow on you. It's like the first time you hear a song, sometimes it can be grating or like you're not sure if you like it. You listen to it 3 or 4 or 5 times and suddenly it's your favorite song. And you just need to, because it's so new and fresh, you need to get comfortable with it. And I think this, it just is so radically different than expectations, first of all, and then anything that's out there. And I think, if you think of when the Countach first hit the scenes in the early 70s, it was so radically different than anything. And I think that just creates a polarizing moment.
Yeah.
And then as you live with it and you start to understand, wow, this is it actually works, it functions, it's different, but it's so unique. And suddenly you want to be part of that kind of uniqueness. I don't know. It's when you're creating something, you never really know what the reaction's going to be. I think we've worked really hard as a team at Tesla to make sure that all of our products have, some sort of allure and captivity and character that, I think people can feel really good about owning and putting in their driveway or in front of their house or whatever, and feel confident in their purchase, just from a style perspective. And I think, Cybertruck is radical, so it touches on like the uniqueness, but it's 100% functional, if not more functional than any of the other incumbents. So in that sense, we wanted to make sure that we didn't do something that was radically different, but couldn't stand up to the true test of why people really buy a pickup truck.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say, would you agree that literally no other car company on the planet would have green-lit that thing?
Yeah, and I think, the interesting thing is that we were going through exercises as well in the early development phases where we were looking at, more normal kind of silhouettes and realizing like we have an opportunity to do something different, an opportunity that nobody else would have the balls to do. And Elon's like, yeah, we've got to do it. So, and hats off to taking that risk. And I think and what's been interesting is we've seen people that would never consider owning a pickup truck or wouldn't, a pickup truck's just not something they need or it's not on their radar, be attracted to this because of the uniqueness. And I think that's actually really quite interesting that we've pulled from, we've pulled people away from their kind of normal comfort zone and brought them to something that's just radically different and will be on the street radically different. And if you're not used to attention, it might be a little tough in the beginning, but.
Well, I've got to ask because the community has asked this, and I myself have wondered this. Cybercar, is this project a one-off, as it were? Is it self-contained, or is this the manufacturing process, the stainless steel? Like, is this the start of a new line? Could we see a Cybercar from you?
Possibly.
He's smirking right now. Since this is an audio podcast, you can't see it.
Well, I think, we look at each vehicle and try to extract the uniqueness out of what each vehicle is trying to represent.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things about the stainless steel that just work for this kind of workhorse truck kind of community and environment. And so it just makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah.
Could you say the same thing about a sedan or something? Probably not, but, it's not that we haven't thought about it.
Is the Cybertruck finished from a design perspective? I mean, we're due to go into production in the next 6 months, so...
Basically, yes.
Yeah, so it's pencils down. I mean,
we never really have a pencils down kind of thing.
Yeah, we're going to get to that with Model S.
We work consistently through the entire process, and we're constantly working on every detail and, the refinement of that, so... And we learn things through the engineering phases and the manufacturing development phases that we can improve on, and so we do. And so we have teammates that are actively working to ensure that the phases and the development phases as we get into manufacturing, that we're trying to scrutinize every millimeter of the vehicle, make sure we've gotten it right, and if we didn't, we continue to work on it through production to improve it and constantly improve. And I think you see that on all of our products, that there's constant improvement.
You just refreshed the Model S again since it was redesigned. The new Model S has been refreshed twice already.
Right.
And we'll cover that here in a few minutes too, because I actually really like the sort of simplification, the stuff you've done with that, particularly the back end of the Model S. This probably applies to the doors of the Cybertruck too. The prototype's got self-presenting door handles similar to the Model S. You've now gone to, no need. Why have to cut this?
Exactly.
Simplify the process.
Exactly.
So are they going to function similar to the Model X front doors, where it's going to sense the key fob and pop open for you, like the invisible chauffeur?
Yes.
Yeah. Front and the back doors as well. Or is
possibly in the back.
A button for those?
There are also buttons on the B pillar and C pillar. Yeah.
That's what it looked like on the newer prototypes, and I wasn't quite sure. Yoke. Prototype's got a Yoke. You seem to like them, although you just offered the choice now on the new SNX. Cybertruck, production, Yoke, yay or nay?
I think the Yoke makes a lot of sense. Once you experience it's a great driving experience. Combined with autopilot, it makes the whole kind of user experience in the interior cockpit simpler and cleaner. And so we're looking at the Yoke there too.
Are there features on the Cybertruck that we don't know about yet?
I think there are some features. I'm not going to talk about them, but I think they'll be pleasant surprises, and I think they're the right things for the product, and they're the right kind of competitive things for the product as well. So, there's things that we're paying attention to, and we want to make sure that we bring a great amount of functionality, performance, drive characteristics, all those things, and just usability to the truck, and realize that people use pickup trucks or trucks in general like Swiss Army knives. There's not one recipe for everybody. Everybody brings their own kind of thing to it, and so we want to make sure that we were aware of that, and that the truck can be tailored and tuned to your specific desires.
Is vehicle to grid, vehicle to home one of those features?
I won't comment, but
what have you thought of the competition so far? Because you're it's somewhat new for you guys to not be first in an electric vehicle space. I mean, technically, the Model 3 officially wasn't the first, mid-size EV sedan. But what do you think of what everybody else is doing so far?
I mean, I think first of all, it's great that there's a push for the other manufacturers to move into the EV space, right? And I think that's kind of our ultimate mission, is to make sure that we
and it's working. Isn't that cool for you?
Yeah, it's amazing.
To see, there's no way these electric pickup trucks would exist without Tesla.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no way.
I think that's that's a testament to what we've been able to achieve so far, and I think we're moving the needle, and that's great. It needs to happen for the environment, for the longevity of this planet, et cetera. There's all that mission is super important to us. So I think it's great that we're seeing, other manufacturers out there, doing this. I think the challenges are still, competitively priced vehicles, and I think also, having the utility and the range, the usability basically, is really challenging, and I think we're still leaders in a lot of those areas. So,
I want to pivot now. You've kindly humored my Cybertruck questions for almost half an hour. We are in the Roadster conference room. There is a picture of the next generation Roadster that I'm staring at right now. It is behind you. I'm hoping you might be willing to talk about that car a little bit today, because it's been a while. Many of us are eagerly awaiting it. What is going on with that car right now?
I mean, we're developing the car. I think we have priorities as a company and the priorities are mass electrification, and Roadster is not a mass product.
Sure.
So unfortunately, it takes its kind of position, but we are working on it in earnest, and I think the time that we've taken has enabled us to really improve on basically every metric what we set out to establish when we first debuted that. And I think if you can just kind of extrapolate the performance and the usability of a Plaid Model S, and you can imagine where that could go, then I think your imagination takes you to where we're headed as well, in the capability and how much better the Roadster will be, and the weight will be absolutely worth it. And because if you think about a Plaid Model S, basically hits all the metrics that we said
1.99 seconds
the Roadster could do, which seemed impossible for a car at that time.
Right.
And so imagine. You let your imagination run a little bit.
I've had years to do so.
Yeah, I know.
Let's see. All right, I can tell this. I'm going to have to wait on a lot of these Roadster questions.
Yeah.
Because I got to figure it's going to have a 4 motors because the Cybertruck's got 4. All the things you're talking about where you're letting the imagination carry you.
Can't give away any secrets.
So something you said to me in our last interview a couple years ago, actually 3 years ago, that stuck with me was that you said you work on the Model S every day.
Feels like it, yes.
And I know you drive.
And back then, I think we hadn't done the refresh that's out now.
Yeah.
And so there was work leading up to that, and we still look at, even though we've just done a refresh and it's a big improvement on the car, we're still looking at how do we continue to make it better.
So then tell me, what did you work on it yesterday?
I did not work on it yesterday, but probably the day before.
What'd you do?
I can't tell you.
Well, not specifics, but like what are you looking like? What is it? Is it like, do you look at different interior things? Are you looking at exterior things? Like what?
Well, also looking at the UI. UI is something that's ever evolving, and so we're working constantly on that. So that technically counts.
So Tesla owners, Tesla fans had been really looking forward to seeing a facelift for the Model S for a while before it actually hit in I keep wanting to say last year, 2021 at this point. How long was that in the works? Like how long were you working on that before we saw it?
I don't remember exactly how long. It's something that we knew we wanted to do, and we also took the opportunity to improve manufacturability, service things, and just make general improvements on it. So, doing some refresh like that with the interior and the exterior, it still takes a fair amount of time. We probably worked on it a year or so.
Man, that's got to feel good when it finally hits, right?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's just like launching another car. I mean, like the Model S is in a way, it's like a timeless car, and it's so we wanted to be really specific about the improvements that we did. To not take away from kind of the inherent beauty that already exists in the car. And it's just being introduced into new markets now, so it's fresh for a lot of markets.
Deliveries have
European
just started.
Deliveries and China and stuff. So it's still emerging and still a brand new car to a lot of people.
For me, widening the rear of the car makes a really subtle but important difference, especially when I live in the San Francisco area, so I get a chance to see lots of Model S's around. When you see them side by side, the pre-2021 car,
just better.
It really just gives the car a more aggressive stance. Was that more of an aesthetic choice or a performance choice driven by the plaid? Not that every new Model S is plaid.
It was performance, getting wider tires into the rear for better grip. And handling was something that we wanted to do, and just as a result, we needed to get the rear quarters wider.
So again, we talked about it a minute ago. I want to get into a little more of the new tweaks that you just rolled out publicly on the new S and to an extent the new X as well. Let's start with the new option for the round steering wheel. So, are you responding to customer feedback there, or did something else inspire that decision? And the reason I ask that is because historically, Tesla seems to prefer streamlining the configuration options as much as possible because, of course, it simplifies manufacturing and allows you to just deliver more cars and get more EVs on the road. So I'm curious if you can speak to that a little bit.
I think it was just making sure that we had we had a car that people really loved, and if there was, if somebody was, loved the car, but the yoke was in the way, we wanted to just remove that obstacle. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. You also cleaned up the backs a little bit, the rears of the car, by getting rid of that T logo badge. I was happy to see that because for me it was maybe a little too busy, but it really jumped out to me after the refresh when you had a chrome T logo and then the glossy black Tesla line there.
In the early days, people didn't know who Tesla was, what a Tesla was, and what who we were, and it was important to at least kind of spell it out to them. And so putting the badging in that way, somewhat redundant on the rear, made sense because they didn't know what a T was. Like, it could have been anything. So I think now we're more established and we can have some better restraint on over logoing our cars. And that's just like an internal pet peeve of mine as well. As
you're a minimalist.
Yeah,
which I am
think,
too. With
when you buy the car and you don't need to see like 27 times that it's got Tesla all over in every nook and cranny. And I feel like it's kind of it's a detail that a lot of companies or designers use to just fill up some dead space and kind of over brand the car. And I think once you own it, you know what you have, and you don't need to be reminded everywhere you look.
I mean, with the 2021 refresh, you got rid of even the Model S word mark there on the trunk as well. So it's you just now. You don't need to literally spell it out for people anymore.
Exactly, and I think it's just makes the car cleaner. I think aesthetically it looks better, and like I said, Cybertruck has almost no badges.
Right. Are there in
itself,
outside, right?
In itself, it's its own badge.
Sure.
It's so unique. It doesn't really need one. So.
I would imagine the closest thing might be probably the door sill plate. Maybe has the graffiti Cybertruck.
Yeah, and I mean that's its own thing. It's not a Tesla badge, right? So.
I love it. What made you want to go with I'm sure you explored a ton of options, the capacitive touch buttons on the Yoke, and now the new steering wheel on the new S and X. That's something where, at least at what I see in the Tesla community, the feedback's a little more mixed. So I'm sure you tried a lot of things. Can you kind of speak to?
Yeah, I think it was just a cleaner solution, and when they work well. And I think the mechanical switches can feel clunky. There's gaps. Gaps fill up with grime and gunk, and it can feel old over time. And we always want to be pushing and feeling like even though you've owned the car for 3, 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it is, that it still feels modern and fresh, and as hardware fresh and modern as when you bought it. And I think that's where we saw that going.
How about I want to ask a question that I don't pretend to understand, and that's drag coefficients. I mean, I know lower's better. You want to be more aerodynamic. How did you drop the drag coefficient on the refreshed S by so much when it's still generally the same shape of the body? Is it all kind of in that lower air dam up front? And I know it's probably a lot of little things.
We have aerodynamicists in the building on our team. We work with them all day, every day. Almost they're as involved in the design process as the designers themselves. And I think when you have that knowledge and the ability to, we've done a really good job of correlating wind tunnel with the software programs that we use. And I think when you have that kind of daily interaction and we're moving, tenths of millimeters around, the influence of those movements may not be that visible to the naked eye, but they can have a huge impact on the wind. And so we just try to take advantage of that. And so it's just, it's a process. It's not a, let's do that and suddenly you get 10 counts reduction. It's a process of winnowing and working and refining and tweaking, and I think having that hourly, daily conversation with the team ultimately makes that impact. And so we worked all over the car. It's not just in the things you can see. There's areas that you can't see underneath the car we cleaned up, and even the car even though the CDA, the frontal area of the car is bigger because it's wider, we were able to reduce the overall drag and just get better at that process as well. And I feel like it's I always say it's like one of the arrows in our quiver that we have as designers, to be able to improve the overall efficiency of the car through really intelligent design and intelligent aerodynamic design. And I think we're fortunate to have a really great team that we do interact with consistently, and we basically, it's almost a requirement that they're part of the process. They're as involved, like I said, as the designers.
Yeah. How many times would you say that the Model S specifically has been more or less completely redesigned under the skin? Because it feels like, just as somebody that follows Tesla really closely, it's got to be at least 2 or 3 times, right? That really the whole, everything that you can't see has been...
Yeah, it's kind of a blur.
I mean, there have been a couple of drivetrain revisions.
There's constant like improvements through the years. Like we've improved seats over time. There's... I don't know. It's probably more than that.
I would, in fact,
if you tried to bucket it that way, but if you looked at just the improvements in kind of a singular process, it feels like it's consistently been evolving and getting better.
Well, I actually did want to ask you about the seats next, because those have come a long way since the original Model S in 2012. By my count, there have been at least 4 seat revisions. I've had the pleasure of sitting in all of them along the way. Are you happy with the seats in all 4 of the cars now? And if not, what do you want to do with them moving forward?
I think the seats in the cars now are really great. I think they're the best that they've ever been. We're always working on comfort and improving the overall ride dynamics of the cars, and the seats are your kind of first feel of what the ride dynamic is. So I think that's also a process that we go through, and that we've continued to try to perfect, and the team has gotten better and better, and we'll always be trying to evolve seating and making that better, because that's, as we move into this kind of autonomous era, the seat is now one of the most important elements of the interior of the car, and you're not the need for the seat kind of changes between whether you're driving and spirited driving or you're just a passenger, and so that evolution has been entertaining and fun.
Well, I did want to ask you about that. Like, how does the prospect of full autonomy change the way you think? I mean, don't you kind of get to totally rewrite the rules of at least interior design and probably exterior to some extent?
Yeah, I think theoretically, yes. Like we're cognizant of how people interact in the cars, and if they're like a short distance or a long distance, what they're doing in the car, or like what do you do when you are in an Uber or Lyft and you're not having to pay attention anymore, how you're passing your time, and those aren't necessarily great examples because the rear seats of a lot of those cars are not super comfortable, but I think this is an opportunity to really improve and the luxuries that you are giving back time, and time is the most luxurious thing that we have, the most precious thing that we have. And if we can give that back, and you can be productive or doing something different than concentrating on, the mundane task of getting from A to B, then, that's the most important thing. And we want to make sure that that's done comfortably and safely, and, comfort inside a car comes down to like the seat and the accoutrement that's around.
Can we talk about paint colors for a second? Because European customers now on their Model Ys have access to Quicksilver, which from the pictures looks gorgeous, and Midnight Cherry Red looks incredible as well. I'm guessing you have a lot of say, and perhaps all of the say and the final say in those paint color choices as they're developed and finally
We develop approved. All the colors here. With the team, and we evolve them, and we do all the testing and kind of the development. Ultimately, Elon has the final say. So I guess maybe I'm second in that chain. But as anything that we design, we're always trying to make the best we can in the moment, and then if we can improve it, then we will. And both those colors are so pretty in person. Tough to capture how really amazing those colors are until you see them in person.
Well, we've had the same 5 for North America, certainly for several years now. Will the other factories and thus other vehicles either get paint shop upgrades to also get Quicksilver and Midnight Cherry Red, or can we? I guess the bottom line is, are we due for some new paint colors here in this country?
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, you get to you're in charge of that.
Yeah, wait and see.
I imagine the Roadster is going to have its own unique set of paint colors. Is that fair too?
I think the Roadster, there's an opportunity for the Roadster to be unique, but we haven't determined that 100% yet. So.
Fair enough. The Model 3 and Model Y, the 3, I adore my Model 3 performance. I've had it for 4.5 years now. It's really, compared to the Model S, it hasn't changed quite as much, or nearly as much, I would say, to the end user. I mean, you've done stuff like the engineering on the octo valve. There've been some under the skin things, but now that you're, minimalization is such a big thing for you. Should we expect the stalks to get deleted on the 3 and the Y sooner or later?
I mean, I think there's things that we're always looking at, and so, I think that those vehicles are great at what they are, and I think, we haven't seen a need or a demand for a change. So don't fix it if it isn't broke. That's kind of the mentality.
That makes sense. I mean, I did a little poll through my podcast.
And you look at the 3 and the Y as well on the road, and they're still
they look great.
They're super modern feeling. They're there's no why change? Why spoil that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What does it mean to you that the Model Y, a car you designed, is now on its way and probably inevitably, maybe this year, maybe next year, is going to be the best-selling passenger vehicle in the entire world? Do you ever think about that?
Honestly,
things like that?
Honestly, no, and it's pretty amazing, and it kind of is just hitting me as you say it. I think it's any designer, anybody working, any engineer, wants to see the success of their labor. And I think, it's been amazing to see that we've created something that, people want to purchase and want to use and is making a really positive impact in transportation. And I think that, the most rewarding part is just seeing how people love their vehicle, the thing that, that they've put their hard-earned cash into, and that they're having, a great experience with it, and that's the most rewarding part. Whether it's one person or millions, millions is always great, but as long as people are loving it, then I think that's the most important part.
I mean, at this point, are you pretty numb to just seeing other Teslas on the road, or does it still give you a little?
Here in LA, it's there's quite a few of them, but I always see there's opportunity and room for more, and I think it's just a small percentage of the overall vehicles that are on the road that are EVs in general, and so it's a huge opportunity that we have to go out and convert more customers and continue to prove to them that an EV is a better solution, better overall ownership experience, better driving experience, and far safer than any other car out on the road.
Yeah,
and,
I think
I always tell I have a family with kids, and I shudder to think of putting my kids in any other car because it's less safe.
Right.
And if you want to do the right thing for your family and have the lowest probability of injury, then you have to put them in a Tesla.
Yeah, there was a horrific accident in Northern California that you may have heard about recently, and that I talked about it on my podcast last week. It's just my wife's shopping for a new car to replace her 18-year-old Mini Cooper, and Model 3's always been the front runner, but maybe we'll take a look at a couple other EVs and it's just that story erased any consideration of anything else.
Yeah, I mean, even when somebody wasn't looking out for their family, Tesla was.
Right. That's a hell of a way to put it.
Think about it.
Yeah. Wow. In our first interview, you told me that Tesla doesn't have a design language per se, that every car has to adhere to, it's got to have this kind of front end or what have you.
Yeah.
I'm curious. You guys have a Shanghai and Berlin design centers. that you've spun up. What's your relationship with them? Are you pretty hands-on with what those teams are up to?
Or? They're basically part of our team. It's like a global team. And ultimately, we would like to see the evolution of those, markets and the designers and the teams working there to, basically work on localized products. We're just not at that space yet, but it's like an expansion of our team.
So the plan is still someday for them to design their own cars?
Ultimately, I think that's the ultimate goal, yeah. And I think, every designer and engineer wants to work on something, specific to, not just get handed stuff to finish,
Right.
And, so I think we want to take advantage of that, and I think there's opportunity in those markets for some localization, and we want to be prepared for that.
Recently, you talked about wanting to shorten the time from design to production. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What would doing that take, and what are the challenges that you've run into specifically at Tesla that would need to be overcome for that? Like, for instance, the Model 3, from at least what we could see publicly, seemed to get to production pretty quickly, whereas the Roadster, which you've already covered, it's a more of a priority thing, has not. So can you kind of talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think we're always pushing to accelerate. The most important thing we can do is to have our products available to the public. That's the way that you change, you make a change and you adhere to the mission. So it just behooves us to go as fast as possible to deliver the ideas. And each project, each program has its own unique hurdles and issues and design things, and we're always looking to improve the process in general. And we learn from each one to try to get better on the next. And the volume products are the ones that make the biggest impact, and those are the ones we focus on the most. So I think it's just the relationships that we have between the different teams. We really try to blur those lines. So
what have you? I have to imagine that. You were already a seasoned, well-established car designer before you got to Tesla, but you guys are rewriting a lot of rules here. How has your skill set grown? Can you kind of talk broadly about how?
I hope it's
about
grown.
You. Well, about non-design things, maybe sort of the expanding your knowledge base would probably be the best way to put that.
Yeah, I think myself and our team are consistently in the factories. We're working hand to hand with engineers. We're just involved in the project from the beginning to the end, and then beyond. Actually, there is no end. We keep iterating and trying to improve. And I think that's ultimately the biggest thing that I think that we do that maybe is unique to what I recall from the past in different companies. And I think those lack of barriers and lack of a middle management kind of bureaucracy has been huge. It's huge enabler. And the decision process is sometimes defined by speed. When in doubt, there is no doubt kind of a thing. You just got to go. So helps formulate, have a good idea and go with it and execute.
Just as a thought exercise, if you could go back and start the Model 3 over, what would you change, if anything?
What would I change on the Model 3? I don't know. It's such a good car. And driving in this morning was driving, next one. I have VIN 10. I drive my car, regularly, and it's still a great car. It's just a rear-wheel drive version, and it's, stood up over the test of time, and it's a great car. It's hard to imagine what I would change on it.
Yeah, I probably would say the same thing after owning it for a while.
It's kind of really hit a sweet spot, and I think it's still a great car. And the improvements that we've been trying to do to make it, dynamically better, drive better, better sound levels in the interior, better seats. All those things are just constant improvements and refinements. We get feedback. We try to, iterate and improve on those. So, there's not anything huge that stands out at me that we would try to improve.
Is there the Model Y has a plan in place to move to the structural battery pack, the 4680 battery cells that's already happening in Texas. We've not heard anything about that with regard to the Model 3, but it remains a high volume, awesome car. Have to imagine that at some point along the way, that's going to happen for manufacturing simplicity and other benefits. I got to try, right? I got to try. You know, if there were theoretically a Project Highland, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't talk about forward things. So.
Fair enough. I will close with this question, and that is, you know, you've still got a lot of career ahead of you. You're still a young man. You've been at Tesla for a while. You've been in the industry for a while, but you got plenty of daylight ahead of you. But what do you hope your legacy is someday when you're looked back on?
Good question. I never actually took the time to think about it. I think, you know, the things that we're working on currently and the ideas into the future, you know, I think autonomy is going to radically reshape the way that we move ourselves around and that transportation in general. And I think being kind of on the tip of that change is super exciting to me. And you know, maybe what we do at Tesla becomes kind of a gold standard for what the future of transportation is like. I think that would be pretty awesome, and I think we're poised to be able to do that. So I think that keeps me excited, and you know, it's like, and it's somewhat of an unknown. You know, nobody's really gotten there yet and had a recipe or figured out how people really want to, you know, be chauffeured around in their own kind of private space. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I look forward to being part of that process.
All right, I lied. I guess I'll ask one more question. That is, you said you didn't work on you worked on the Model S maybe a day or two ago.
Yeah.
Which car are you working on today? You don't have to tell me exactly what, obviously, but
probably. Well,
what's today's focus?
Today,
after this,
it's been all over the map. Probably touched on just about everything today, and then some.
Oh, and then some. Oh, that's a good answer. Franz von Holzhausen, thank you very much. Your second appearance here on Ride the Lightning. I really, truly appreciate the invitation and the time.
Yeah, happy to join.
Again, a massive thank you goes out to Franz and his team for setting that up. I recognize that is an extremely special opportunity. I don't take it lightly. I don't take it for granted. And I'm just so, so grateful to have had the chance to go down and do that interview. I really hope all of you enjoyed listening to it. And hopefully at some point, Franz will want to come back on and talk even more Roadster once he's ready to really, really dig in and talk about that car. Normally, I would end the podcast there because A, it's been about an hour, and that's about how long the podcast is each week. And also, this was an extremely special episode, and there was a Franz interview. There's nothing else that needs to be said. That's it. That's the big news of the week. Except this week. The day after my interview with Franz, Tesla slashed their prices across the board. And I want to talk about it a little bit because obviously you'll all want to hear about this. Those of you who've been waiting to purchase a Tesla, saving up, this is very relevant to your interests. Here we go. Here are the details. The base Model 3 went from, and I'm going to round up here because all these prices are $990 is what they end with. I'm just going to round up. Base Model 3 was $47,000. It is now $44,000. The Model 3 Performance was at $63,000. It is now $54,000. The Model Y Long Range, the vehicle that is on track, you heard me talk about it with Franz, on track to become the best-selling passenger vehicle on Earth, whether that happens this year or next year. And this price drop that you're about to hear, if you haven't heard about this already, because boy, this was talked about everywhere as soon as it happened, it could help spur this to become the top-selling vehicle in the world this year, because the Model Y dual-motor long range went from $66,000 to $53,000. The Model Y Performance from $70,000 to $57,000, also a notable drop. Even the Model S and Model X saw price cuts as well. The base long-range Model S went from $105 to $95. The Model S Plaid, a $20,000 price cut from $136,000 to $115,000, $21,000. The Model X long range from $121 to $110, and the Model X Plaid from $139 to $120. Now, the key to this, not literally the biggest price cut out of all those, but arguably the most important one, is that Model Y dual motor long range. It now qualifies for the full $7,500 federal tax credit by virtue of it now being under the $55,000 MSRP cap that the US government allows on a car. Because as you remember from when this first came up on a very recent episode of this podcast, for some reason, the 5-seater Model Y is not considered an SUV in this new tax credit setup, but the 7-seater Model Y is. So that means that not only is this Model Y long range $13,000 cheaper for everyone, but if you also meet the income requirements for the new tax credit, you can have a 330-mile range Model Y that includes basic autopilot for that price for, in the end, aside from taxes and registration fees, of course, $45,500. That is incredible, and that, to me, is, simply put, it's game over for any other mid-size crossover SUV, which only happens to be the largest vehicle segment, at least in North America, in the United States. Probably Canada's in there too. I think we can probably lump all of North America in there. You know, that is the crossover SUV is a massive vehicle category in this country, and $45,500 if you qualify for the credit. Why would you buy anything else, gas or electric? Now, we're rooting for all the other EVs too. We need more good EVs at more affordable prices, but this is Tesla leveraging their advantages. What do I mean by that? Well, they vertically integrate their batteries. So they're able to produce their batteries for a lower cost than any of their competition, who for the time being has to purchase them from a supplier, whether it's LG, whether it's Panasonic, etc., or Samsung. So that is huge. The battery is the most expensive component of any electric vehicle at this point in time. And Tesla making its own batteries, which they've been doing now since around 2017 or so, when Giga Nevada opened up outside of Reno. It's a huge competitive advantage that Tesla is now leveraging. And so it's just awesome to see this come down. Now, I'll be honest here. This new price, is really just back to what the Model Y probably should be priced at. It had gotten crazy expensive over the past 18 to 24 months. I got really tired of having to do podcasts where I announced another $1,000 price increase on the Model Y, because there were a number of those podcasts. For those of you that have been listening over the last couple of years, it just kept happening. And so to see almost all of that price increase over the last couple of years wiped away in one fell swoop is just incredible. I mean, it's great to see in the end. Now, I realize it's not necessarily great to see for those of you, and this likely affects a number of you listening, who took delivery of a long-range dual-motor Model Y in the past month or two. It probably really hurts to hear this. I mean, you still got a great car, and I think you'd probably still agree with that. I hope you're liking your car. But obviously, it's the 1-2 punch of not just the huge price drop, but also the tax credit eligibility on top of that turns this into, again, potentially a $20,000 swing, which is just wild. Now, I got to be honest, I'm not sure there was any good, quote unquote, good way for Tesla to have done this. I mean, the only thing that comes to mind is maybe doing gradual decreases over time. But if they had done that I would suspect would run the risk of really slowing demand way down, because after the second or third gradual decrease, you'd start to train people to just wait for the next decrease before ordering. Now, Tesla could do something nice something for recent buyers. You could offer those people a service credit, a merchandise credit for the online Tesla shop, free enhanced autopilot, something. I'd like to see Tesla do something for those people that were affected. Now, I understand that the reverse argument is a fair one. Well, for when Tesla increased prices, you got really excited if you had just ordered your car and you got in before the price increase. And you're not exactly in any hurry to cut Tesla a check to make up the difference when the price goes up. So I know it does cut both ways, but just the fact that this was so huge of a decrease all at once, I empathize with those of you out there who took delivery recently and are stinging a little bit right now. But at least the car that you got is the same awesome vehicle today as it was when you ordered it. Also, I want to talk about the Model 3. So the base Model 3 and the Performance Model 3 also qualify for the full $7,500 tax credit, at least until March, which is when the government is expected to define the specific criteria around the tax credit, with which half of that is supposed to be focused on where the battery content was sourced. And the base Model 3 uses the LFP battery pack, which comes from China. So that is likely in March to disqualify the base Model 3 from at least half of the credits. So if you're in the market for that car, you might want to move now if you can, with one big consideration that I want to make sure you're fully aware of before you click order. I will come back to that in just a second, because first I just want to talk about the dual motor long-range Model 3, which has been unavailable to order for a few months now. So whenever that vehicle comes back, it should also qualify for the full $7,500, and it should do so even after March, since that car uses Giga Nevada sourced batteries. And I figure price-wise for that, the dual motor long range, with the base version now at $44,000 and the performance at $53,000, I think it's fair to expect the long range to basically just split the difference. I think it's going to be $48,000 or $49,000 when it returns. We'll just have to wait and see whenever Tesla decides to put it back up on the design studio. And then finally, before I come back to my big word of caution, the Performance Model Y does not qualify for the new tax credit, since that vehicle is only available in a 5-seat configuration, and its MSRP is over the car limit of $55,000 of an MSRP. So, my only word of caution here, if you're itching to buy right now with these price drops, I just want to mention one thing, and that is Autopilot Hardware 4. Now, yes, it's true. We've seen it over the years. If you sit around and wait for the next upgrade on a Tesla, you'll be waiting forever and you'll never order a car, because there's always some new component, some new piece of tech, some new feature that gets added into the car, because Tesla doesn't subscribe to traditional model years. They're always upgrading the cars. They're always rolling new things into them. So yes, there's that. But Hardware 4, I think, is the exception to that rule, at least in my book. Because as I've said before, I don't expect there to be an upgrade path to Hardware 4 for the Hardware 3 cars that are in our garages now. I hope I'm wrong about that. I would be delighted to be wrong about that, But for now, I think we just have to expect that there will be no upgrade path and just be pleasantly surprised if it turns out there is. In fact, my wife and I once again discussed buying her a Model 3, which we first really got serious about considering it last summer. She went and took a test drive, and we considered it again at the end of December when Tesla was offering that $7,500 discount straight off the top, as well as the bonus little extra of 10,000 free supercharging miles. But we have decided, we talked about it last night when the price cuts hit, we're going to hold off. Unless her 2005 Mini Cooper straight up dies, which we acknowledge could happen, we're going to wait for the Cybertruck, and then I think we're going to go with that. But the base Model 3 is now $3,000 less than it was last month, so I'm glad we didn't pull the trigger at that time. And just getting back to today, focusing on now, $36,500 after the tax credit for the base Model 3. $36,500, and you are getting, for that price, a lot of car for the money. A great, great car for the money, in my opinion. It is a 272-mile range car that has 272 miles of daily usable range thanks to that LFP battery pack that is designed to be charged all the way up to 100% each day. And again, you are getting basic autopilot included for that as well. So that's a great deal in my opinion, and I hope that lets a lot more people get one for themselves. Hopefully plenty of you out there are eagerly and excitedly ordering your car right now. One other thing on this topic, it's sort of a footnote to the whole thing. Interestingly enough, Midnight Silver Metallic paint color is no longer free. It had been free for the past couple of years or so, but it's back to being a $1,000 upcharge if you'd like that color. Pearl White Multicoat remains free. You don't have to pay any extra for it. And it is now, once again, the only free paint color. And you heard me bring it up with Franz. I hope we get at least one new paint color choice this year here in the United States, even if it comes at a premium. Like Quicksilver's a premium, Midnight Cherry Red. Those are extra cost paint finishes for those of you in Europe who get to order your Model Y from Giga Berlin. Hopefully we get something similar here in the United States as well. All right, next week we'll get back to a regular show, go through all the week's Tesla news, analyze it, break it down, etc. I'll get to your phone calls in the Ride the Lightning hotline. So I'll just mention, if you would like to call in and potentially be heard here on the podcast, perhaps you want to react to something that Franz said in my interview, I welcome you. I encourage you to call in on the Ride the Lightning hotline. There are two easy ways to do that. You can either use your smartphone's built-in voice recording software, record your question. I humbly ask that you keep it to 90 seconds or less so that I can get to as many callers each week as possible. And then you email that file to me at my show email address, which is teslapodcast@gmail.com. Or the other way that you can call in to the Ride the Lightning hotline and potentially be featured here on the show is to actually call in and leave a message on the Ride the Lightning hotline itself. It's a toll-free number that you can call anytime, and the number is 1-888-989-8752. Again, that's 1-888-989-TSLA, and I will look forward to hearing from you. And that'll wrap it up for this very, very, very special episode of Ride the Lightning. Again, I've been on cloud nine all week. This was such an incredible opportunity, and I had a blast interviewing Franz. I really hope you all enjoyed listening to it. If you are a new listener, again, episode 200 with Elon, episode 220 with Franz the first time. This podcast publishes every single Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. It is published every Sunday like clockwork since I started it back in August of 2015. So I am here for you each and every Sunday talking about all things Tesla. So I hope maybe you'll come back. If you enjoyed this one, maybe you'll come back and see what the regular episodes are all about next week. I'm on all the major podcast services. If you want to subscribe or follow, it's every podcast service kind of calls it something else. It's free. By subscribe, it's a free thing. You know, most people seem to get the podcast on Apple Podcasts / iTunes. There's also, I'm on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. I'm on those, and those are available natively in your Tesla, so you can listen to me directly in your car there as well. I am also on YouTube, but there's no video. It's just an audio-only podcast. This is not my day job, so I just don't have the time or resources to do video on top of things as well. But if you just want to have a browser tab open and you prefer to listen on YouTube, just search Ride the Lightning Tesla on YouTube, and you should find my channel pretty easily. You can subscribe to it there and just listen that way every week. So, last thing I'll mention is that you can email me anytime, teslapodcast@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram if you'd like to follow me on either of those social media platforms. My handle is the same on both. It's DMC_Ryan. And if you're curious what the DMC means, it's DeLorean Motor Company. I had a DeLorean in a previous life, a very, very wonderful period of time. I guess you already figured that out from listening to the Franz interview. The story of how I got into Tesla is episode 1. If you want to hear my Tesla origin story, I talk about it there. Anyway, that'll do it for Ride the Lightning episode 389. I will see you back here again next Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. Happy electric motoring.
I mean, I think a Tesla is the most fun thing you could possibly buy ever. That's what it's meant to be. Our goal is to make it's not exactly a car. It's actually a thing to maximize enjoyment. It's maximum fun.